This is going to be an important video, and I'm going to bring out some observations I have about this stuff. Also what I read, what I saw, and why I think it works. I know I hear all this stuff about if your oil is formulated correctly, you don't need any additives, and I think that's generally true. Now, why this stuff works? I think it has to do with, first off, the areas of the motor where there isn't that much oil, like in other words on a in the cylinders, which in this bike I always run some Marvel Mystery Oil in a gas all the time, and in the future I'm going to be running some synthetic Marvel Mystery Oil in with some AMS oil, but I'll get on with that in a second, why I'm doing that for a secondary reason. But I know AMS oil says not to do that, but I know a lot of people have done that. Now, this stuff, reason I think this works is, here's like an actual fact that you can verify everywhere. You know, when they have engines that have an external bypass oil filter in addition to the full fuel filter, that's a special oil filter that takes out ultra fine dirt, right? It's not enough. It's so fine a filter and so restrictive a filter that it has to be an extra add-on bypass filter. They'll use this in the trucks. So they have the full flow filter like they'll have on that. You can't use that extra fine filter like on the full flow area because it would restrict the oil flow. But it's a bypass add-on system that ultra purifies the oil of dirt, right? Now, they tested that in trucks, and trucks can have like 1,000,000 miles on it, and the bearings are in great shape. The reason is the dirt that's left by the extra bypass filter is so fine that it easily passes through the bearing clearances. Where you're getting wear is, okay, it's from cold startups, which the MOTORKOTE can help, definitely there. Even though there's an oil film on there, that's like, you know, that lubricity test where they use the bearing. That is, you know, you got an extra protection there in that case with the MOTORKOTE. But it's also the dirt. Once the engine gets running and you got really clean oil in there, the MOTORKOTE really isn't doing anything, because, at least in the bearings, because there's like, I don't know about in this bike, it's a little different because it's lower oil pressure, but say a car with, you know, the regular like Cleveite bearings, you got like a clearance in there, and that's all oil. The only way those bearings start wearing out is either the oil pressure drops, which case you're screwed, or the normal reason is you have dirt. Now, like I said, the regular oil filter that's full flow captures only so much dirt. So you will get a little bit of dirt in the oil, even if you're changing the oil every 2,000-3,000 miles. You're going to get a little, but you know, even that extends the life of the engine. But what is the dirt? The dirt is hard. It's a hard surface. So, you know, I know there's no contact, you know, with the crank. Now, in this case, a little different, but on a regular car motor, when you have the crankshaft journal and the bearing, there's no contact because it's pressurized oil system. But if there's some dirt, that's where the dirt, even if it's just a little bit, it starts wearing down the bearings a little bit at a time. Again, if you keep that oil ultra pure with a bypass filter, it doesn't, with an add-on bypass filter, it, you know, there's any dirt that's in there is so small that it easily passes through the bearings. Now, what the MOTORKOTE is doing is putting a coat on the bearings and the crankshaft journals, so it's eliminating, it's cutting down any kind of scratches that can come from just a little bit of dirt. And no matter what you do, I mean, if you change your oil every 800 miles or something like that, I guess, you know, you wouldn't have a problem then. But that's what I think this is actually giving a lot more miles life to these trucks and cars, because there's a lot of testimonies out there, and you can't ignore the testimonies. Even though, like they're saying, you know, you got a full pressurized oil system, what is, you know, what could this be doing? That lubricity test with the bearing is not real. You know, it's like you're just pressing, that's not really what's happening in the engine. Well, that is what's happening in the engine at cold startup, I'll say that. But once it's running, that's not what's happening. But think about the dirt. any kind of dirt that's in there is, you know, going to go against a hard surface, and if it's coated with this, that's going to cut down the wear. That's why I think this is working. Now, the other thing is, you got about 60 to 70% of the friction in a motor. And I don't know if it's that way in this motor, but in a car engine, typical car engine, comes from the pistons and the rings. You know, where it's not pressurized, it's like splash, right? You got little oil galleries in a piston that feed into the rings and stuff, and you know, you want to keep the rings clean. So the motor coat isn't like a cleaner, but it actually is coating. You're getting a little bit of coating on the piston skirts and the cylinder walls, and I guess it burns off with the combustion process. But the thing is, it is actually adding a little protection there, and also to the valves and the valve stems, right? The valve guides, I meant to say, the valve guides. So, you know, I think that's, you know, or say you have a flat tappet cam, especially something like that, I think it would give you a little more protection, because I know the tappet is supposed to spin on the lobe of the flat tappet cam, and it's not really dragging, but still, I mean, that can give you a little more protection there with a flat tappet cam. So I think the motor coat is actually a very good thing. Now, I have used Engine Restore, and I think this guy, he's like a Ford guy, like works in a Ford dealer, and I saw he's got some of the damn best videos. He works with that I don't know, the oil guy that's Lake Speed or whatever his name, or Speed Lake or whatever it is, and they got the best videos on the oil stuff for sure. But you know, I'm throwing this in here too. Why I think this stuff works is because, you know, the dirt is going to provide scratches in the motor, and no matter how much, unless you change your oil like every 800 miles or something like that, your oil is going to have some kind of dirt in it. So that protection from the motor coat is going to minimize those scratches. And you definitely want to keep changing your oil, like, you know, I'd say 3,000, really, on a bike especially, you know. I mean, a car maybe 4,000 or 5,000, but you want to keep that oil changed. But that's why I think it works. It's providing a little extra protection from any kind of dirt that might be in there, even though if you're using a really good filter. And I want to mention something about those orange Fram filters. They're not that bad. There's no paper. I don't use them. I have used the Fram synthetic filters. I hear this garbage on here all the time. It's kind of pissing me off. It's a pet peeve. I think Fram used to make better filters back in the 70s and stuff. I know about them back then. They were actually a go-to filter back in the 70s, and they cheapened them up. But they're still not that bad. Those orange filters aren't that bad. They do not fall apart. They have a little less specifications on how much dirt they remove from the oil. But the Frams, like middle grade and top of the line filters, they're actually pretty good. They're not screwed up. I know it's a lot of garbage talk out there because they actually filter very well. The Fram synthetic filters, though, they're quite pricey, and I think you can get a better deal on a Purolator or a Wix or something like that, or even like the motor company ones like Motorcraft, Mopar filters and stuff. I use Motorcraft filters on my some of my other cars. I don't even have own a Ford, but I've used Motorcraft filters, and they're actually good too. Mopar filters are good. Just to mention that, because, you know, when I'm talking about the dirt and the oil, that's really where you're getting a lot of the wear. And so now what I'm going to do is, I'm talking about this Marvel Mystery Oil. Marvel Mystery Oil, like I buy the stuff by the gallon usually, and I put it in the gas. I actually keep a little container with me in this bike, and I always put a dash of it in the gas every time. I don't know if, you know, I think it helps. I don't know if it, you know, I've had the bike since 1989, so that's what I've been doing, okay? It was rebuilt in 1992. But anyway, what I'm going to do in the future, though, the next oil change coming up, and I'm going to probably do this pretty quick. I'll probably only put like 1,500 miles on the oil. And there's AMSOIL in there right now. I got 1560 AMSOIL with, you know, some Marvel and stuff. But what I'm going to do is, this is Florida now. I'm in Florida. So I'm going to use straight AMSOIL 60 weight. which is good for ambient temperatures of 80 degrees and above. If you use straight 50 weight, it's good for ambient temperatures of 60 degrees and above. Now I got a 1560 in there right now. It should be pretty good, but I want to use a straight weight, and I'm going to put some of this, and I'm going to use the synthetic. I'm going to use the synthetic because I don't want you to mix like regular with the AMSOIL. I'm going to actually mix this with the AMSOIL, and I know you can say that's sacrilegious, but I'm going to mix enough of it to bring down the weight to like a 55 weight, because this is a 10 weight oil. And so that would make the bike be good to ambient temperatures down to 70 degrees and still have protection up to, like, 100, whatever Florida has to offer. And I think that's good for Florida. Now, if you're up in North Carolina, New Jersey, New York, Northern California, or even Southern California where the desert gets kind of cold, I wouldn't do that. But Florida, I mean, you're lucky. In the morning, it might be down to 72, 74, but usually by the time I ride the bike, it's in the upper 80s. But that's what I'm going to run, and I want to run this because I know AMSOIL says not to put anything in your oil, but I know there's a lot of people that do it anyway. And this stuff, I've been using this for celebrating 100 years. Exactly. I've been using this forever. I mean, I'm 69 years old, right? And I know this stuff works. I know it works. It just, I think it just adds a little more cleaning abilities to the AMSOIL, which they say, it's got enough in there, but this is a little extra. And I'm also doing it to bring it to a 55 weight, straight 55 weight versus a straight, right, compromising between a 50 and a 60. And I'm going to add some of this, which might bring it down to like a 53 weight, straight 53 weight. So in this, I put in 5 ounces in just about 3 quarts, which should be plenty. I'll kind of tell you if it makes a difference or not. What it might make a difference in is the mileage, because, like I said, it's the 60 to 70% of the friction in the engine is coming from the pistons in the cylinder walls and the rings. So it's going to add some, if it's adding protection where it's not going to wear it out as much, it's also going to make the engine more efficient. Now, that's not the only thing that affects mileage, of course, because, I mean, you got your bearings, your chain, your transmission, plus the thermal efficiency of the gasoline. Like, in other words, a lot of the energy that's stored in the gasoline is being lost through heat. So, then you got your electrical system or whatever else is out there. But, if it increases it by a mile or two, that'd be great, because my other Sportster, this one I had a long time. I had this since '89. My other Sportster, the '91, I just picked up a few months ago. That it's got 20,000 miles, and I only put like just under 500 miles on it in all that time. But I'm using it here and there for sure. I'm waiting for some shocks for that thing, because it's got slammer shocks and it rides just like a hardtail. So I got some shocks coming for it, so I'll be riding it more when I get that. But my point is, that bike I checked it the last time, it got 57 miles per gallon. It's a stock 883. That's why I'm going to leave it stock. It got 57 miles per gallon. That's even without putting any motor coat in it or anything. And it's got the Vance & Hines air cleaner and the Screaming Eagle mufflers. That's the only thing it's got on it. It wasn't rejetted or nothing. This thing, since I have the Dynajet in it, I have the really big high performance, high flow valves by Baisley. I have the head work done, the Andrews cam, and 1220 over. Now, when I did the Dynajet, but I recently went from I put a 190 jet in it, and it actually dropped the mileage, and I thought it needed a little more, because when I was on the highway with the 190 main, 190 should have been fine if I had stock valves. But when I put it, you give it full throttle and you back off to 7/8, it actually sped up going to 7/8. That meant you needed a bigger main. So I went to 200, and now it's fine. But I'm getting about 40 miles to the gallon if I'm lucky. So You know, on a motorcycle, that's pretty piss poor mileage, man. So I'm hoping the motor coat and the Marvel Mystery Oil might help a little with the AMSOIL, you know, which the AMSOIL will probably be with those two additives. It'll probably be about a 53 weight straight weight, which would be great for the summer in Florida. But again, just to repeat that the motor coat works because it's not just, it's got to work, help with cold starts. It's got to help with that. And actually, if you got, say you had a 50 weight in the bike, and you weren't anticipating any temperatures below 60 degrees, right? And that's what it's supposed to be. And say you had a day where it was 45 degrees, and you had the motor coat in there. I think that would provide you some insurance, you know, where, you know, for, you know, a dry start, you know, or less, you know, not perfect lubrication at the start, right? But like I said, I think the big reason is, you know, unless you have a bypass oil filter system, you're never going to have that oil so super duper clean that it's not going to get some scratches from some kind of minor dirt on the bearings and whatever surfaces. And that's where I think this motor coat is really working. That's where that test comes into play, where you're like, you're taking the bearing and you got the handle and you put the weights on it and stuff, and it's, you know, I know you got a full pressure oil system, but the dirt, when it gets in there, between, it's like you get one piece of dirt, tiny, and then it doesn't quite fit through the bearing clearances perfectly. That's where this is going to come into play. And this is why these testimonies, you can't ignore, you know, years and testimonies over millions and millions of miles. You know, I hear all this garbage where they say, you know, these truckers will keep buying it because they're just victims of advertising, but they're saying they're getting like at least 500,000 miles out of stuff, and the fuel economy's going up. You know, it's got to be working. They're not, you know, it's like you're theorizing the reason why, and I'm stating something that nobody else is saying. Think about dirt that scratches the bearing surfaces. Like I said, when you have a bypass oil filter in addition to your full flow filter, and that bypass filter is really super cleaning the oil at all times, you can keep that, the trucks go like 1,000,000 miles in their perfect condition, right? That's because the dirt can't scratch the bearing. So this is why this works, because any dirt that you've got in there is going to scratch the bearings a lot less with this coating on it. So it's not snake oil. And actually I'd say most of them are not like complete snake oil, but they're not necessary. I got some, I just tried some Lucas high mileage, and I know it's just an oil thickener. I don't know what's in the high mileage. I actually bought this stuff. I'm not going to use it in the cars. I'm going to just use it in case I got to oil something up where I didn't have room to douse some grease. I think it's good for where you need a thick oil application maybe, and you can't get in there to grease it or something. That might be the reason for using this. But basically, there's no additives in that stuff. And I don't know if the high mileage version might have a little bit of additives as far as like swelling the seals or something. I'm assuming, you know, for like making the seals more pliable in the old engine. I don't know what it, there's got to be something in it other than the regulars, but it's basically the same. It's the same thing as the regular with one little additive or something, which to me that doesn't really do squat, you know. I know this stuff works because if you got engines with high clearances, I'm going to go on a little longer with this because I want to give you another information. If you got engines with big clearances, it can help. But what I would rather use instead of that is engine restore. Now, this guy with the Ford place, he said that there are cases where engine restore, and I use the engine restore all the time in this old Sebring, which got 263,000 miles on it, and actually it runs great with that stuff, right? But he said there's cases where it clogs up oil passageways and stuff, right? The engine restore, which it's not supposed to do. Well, I think it does that is because you're using it on a sludged up, dirty engine. So if I used engine restore, or before I used engine restore, I would make sure you do either an engine flush the right way, following the directions, or run a quart of Marvel mystery oil in it for an oil change, clean the engine up good, and then use the oil restore. But the oil restore actually is even more protecting than this, even somewhat more than this. But this won't, this stuff is like, if you look at it, it's thin. And that's another thing. That's where I think it's going to, thin out that 60 straight weight when I go change it for that. But if you got an old car, the engine restore might even be a better bet than this. But you got to make sure that oil is real. I mean, your engine is clean. It's not going to clog up oil passages unless that engine is really, really sludged up. I've had no problems with the engine restore. I don't know if I know I got some around here someplace, but maybe I don't have it right here. But I definitely got some. Oh, here you go. Got to have a lot of this, right? Brake parts cleaner and stuff. But yeah. So anyway, I know I got some more of that stuff around because I use it. I use that stuff, and I know it works. If you actually looked at Project Farm, he did some videos on it, but I was using it before he did that videos, and I used it on old lawnmowers. I've used it on my Chevy El Camino over here. This thing, I got it jacked up because I like starting it up and running the transmission and the wheels and stuff. Everything works fine. So, but let me say that that's another product that actually does work. Now, if your engine is like destroyed, it ain't gonna work. But if your engine has like low oil pressure, and you're burning oil, I wouldn't use any Lucas. I would just get 2050 Valvoline, probably something like that, or 2050 Castrol, or something that's 2050, something to thicker oil, or something like that, or even a straight, I don't know about straight waste, but 2050, and add in the engine restore. But make sure that the engine is absolutely clean before you do that. It doesn't have to be like perfect, but if you got a really, really, really sludged up engine, really, really bad, don't go throwing a can of engine restore in there, because you probably could have a problem. But if the engine's clean or just semi-clean, you're never going to have a problem with that engine restore. It doesn't clog in the filter at all. It goes right through the filter. But if you got oil galleries that are just about closed and you're barely getting oil to the engine, and you put that engine restorer in there, it might close them up all the way then. But it's not nothing to worry about if you just do some proper maintenance before you use that product. I want to mention that too, because the engine restorer actually coats the engine even more than this stuff. But I think this is a lot safer for a motorcycle. I have used engine restorer in this thing for a little bit. I didn't put a lot in it, and I was like, I don't know. So, but the bike runs great, and it's still got some valve train noise on the top end. Even though I did the lifters, I readjusted them and I tightened them up just a little more. I put them at 4 1/3 turns. S&S says you can go 4 to 4.5. Normally they say 4 turns tight into the lifter, so I went 4 1/3, not to go even 4.5. And maybe it's just a hair quieter, and it's got the fueling lifters, and it's got the rocker lockers. But I think the reason there's lifter noise, there's valve train noise, is because of the aftermarket valves in the aftermarket cam. There's like backlash in the cam gears in here, that when you're running it slow, the backlash is coming into play. Like on a stock motor, they have all the gears like color coded in here, beneath that cam cover, and they are like exact. So there's next to no backlash, and everything runs a lot quieter. I've heard that aftermarket cams and aftermarket valves will result in more valve train noise. But I was thinking that having a motor coat and the best AMSOIL and stuff like that will because even that noise itself, they say it's not harmful. I mean, if you're considering like over tens of thousands of miles, I think the stock setup would probably last longer. You know, when you're doing some performance stuff, and it's set up a little looser, it's not gonna, you know. So I'm trying to eke the most miles out of this thing as possible. I'm hoping it gets at least, you know, another 60, 70,000 miles out of the top end. That'd be great. That's why I'm doing it. So, you know, if you know, if this works, I'm not going to really know for sure, because I'm kind of going by some of the testimonies. But again, with that logic I told you about the dirt and stuff like that, I mean, you can't avoid. I mean, there's no way to put a bypass oil filter system on this bike that I know of. Or if you could, it would look stupid. You'd have to. Where would you mount it, man? I don't know. where would you put it? So, you know, plus it wouldn't be cheap too. So, you know, I'd have to buy these special bypass filters and stuff, and, you know, buy the kit for that if there was. So this is the way to do it, right? And you know, just throwing that out there. I think this does absolutely work for like the reasons I stated 15 times already, right? But sometimes you got to state it 15 times because people, you know, they still come back and they say blah blah blah, and I just said that 15 times. You know, I mean, that's kind of how it is, man. So I'm trying to teach you something so you learn something here, man. And I'm not selling nothing. I'm not monetized or nothing. So you know, as of right now, so you know, I'm trying to help people get by in the struggling world we got here, because people don't have money, and you know, it's like they don't have money for buying new cars. They got to get by with what they got, and you know, you got to make things last as long as possible. That's how it is, right? So some of these things I think will do that. Okay, over now.